I'm not even going to ask. Hey, I've got my head back. Excellent. Now then, on page 221 of our book, we read about the strategies for including art in the early childhood curriculum. And I want to go over certain strategies, and I want to give my viewpoint as it compares or contrasts with the author's viewpoint. Now, as far as which strategy is the best, that depends on two things, I think. It depends on your personal preferences and style as a teacher. It could also depend on the mission and philosophy of the child care center at which you work. Or it could be a combination of both if your personal preference happens to match that of the child care center at which you're employed. So let's look at the first one. The first one we have is art as a separate activity. So it says here, a teacher may hear about, or read about something that sounds like an enjoyable art activity for children. For example, Mr. Kent was glancing through a magazine in the doctor's office when he got the idea for printing with sponges or different geometric shapes. Okay, so he did a sponge printing activity. Let's skip down to the last paragraph that discusses art as a separate activity. Mr. Kent wished that he had discovered this art activity last week when they were studying geometric shapes in concept time. He did not think to find a song or movement activity related to geometric shapes. Mr. Kent's approach is fragmented with unrelated learning experiences. Now this last sentence I have highlighted. Mr. Kent's approach is fragmented with unrelated learning experiences. Now, when I read that last sentence, I felt rather curious because the author is implying that art as a separate activity is a bad strategy. And if that's the author's viewpoint, I must say I don't entirely agree with that. It may not necessarily be the best strategy, but I see two occasions in which this would be preferable. In fact, two occasions in which I did, as a preschool teacher, use this strategy. The first occasion was when it was almost the end of the day, and it was too early for any of the kids to be picked up. So I had this activity, art activity, that I had planned but never got around to doing. So I did it. I didn't have any other related learning experiences, and that's fine. Now, a second occasion in which I've used this particular strategy is when I brought in a brand new, never before used by the kids art medium. And that art medium was bottle caps. Now, none of the kids had ever used bottle caps as an art medium. And I wanted to get their kids' reaction to this art medium, positive or otherwise. So I did the activity to see what they thought of it. And incidentally, many of the kids did like it, others not as much, but that was my purpose in doing this activity. So those are two occasions in which I've used this particular strategy, and maybe you agree with me or disagree with me or agree more with the author. I don't know. The second strategy is entitled Art Used to Extend or Reinforce Learning in Another Curricular Area. Now, the curricular areas, we see them listed below in Mrs. Gomez's daily lesson. Blocks, dramatic play, table toys, concept time, creative arts, group time. I want to add other curricular areas not included in the list. Music, movement, language and literature, science, what else? Math, science. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. So those are all different curricular areas. Now remember how in your written activities you are creating extensions right after your activity procedure? Well, the extensions could pertain to a curricular area other than art. Now, it says here, Mrs. Gomez's 4-year-old pre-K group had also been studying geometric shapes during math concept time. Okay, so shapes, that's geometry. Geometry is a kind of math. Now, remember when I was doing the foiled again activity with you? Well, when I introduced the foil to you, I already extended art into math. Because remember when I was creating rectangles and having you identify that shape, I created a triangle and had you identify that particular shape. So that is how I extended it into math. Now, in retrospect, there was something else that I could have done to extend art into math. I could have had you all hold up the foil that you had and compare it with your neighbor's foil to see whether you and your neighbor had the same amount of foil. By comparing that way, you're also engaging in math. So that's another particular strategy that you could use. Art as a super activity, integrating several curricular areas, not just one. So Ms. Lansky's kindergarteners were reviewing geometric shapes. She planned to devote Monday to this review. She included the following activities in her super activity. Note the particular areas in parentheses, indicating integration. So what are those parenthetical areas? Math, science, and on the next page, you turning the page with me, let's do it. Science, pre-reading, speaking, creative thinking, listening, pre-writing, art, music and movement, and social studies. Now this part I have highlighted on page 222. It's in the second column. Ms. Lansky's approach to planning help children integrate and coordinate all experiences related to learning about geometric shapes as well as incidental learning about sponges. Ms. Lansky's only objection was that she felt the children's interest and enthusiasm for studying shapes and sponges were more than she had planned for in one day's flow of activities. So, my question to you is, how or what can you do to measure your children's interests when doing this particular strategy? So you've got all of these different activities related to each other, all in different curricular areas. So, what can you do to see whether the children are satisfactorily interested enough to do all of these particular activities before you do them? That's the important question. How do you know how many activities to prepare in advance based on the kids' interests? If you've got paper in front of you, great. If not, get yourself some paper. And I want you to write down the answer to this particular question. How can you measure the children's interests so that you'll know how many different activities to plan, as Ms. Lansky did? That's something I'm going to have you save as part of ICA number 6. Remember the first part of ICA number 6, that's the questions that you are asking before, during, or after the story to the kids. The second part of your ICA is, what can you do to measure the kids' interests, to determine how many related activities you need to plan? So, be ready to respond to that one. And then one more strategy I want to look at is art as an integrated part of an extended unit of study. Mr. Fazar enjoys teaching 4-year-olds with curriculum units. His units are organized around themes such as geometric shapes. His units are planned for days and even weeks at a time, depending on the children's levels of interest and involvement. So there we go. Before you even create a unit, you have to figure out what the children are interested in. So, what do you do to determine what the kids are interested in the first place? before even creating an extended unit of study. There's a third question. Here's a third thing for you to put in your ICA number 6. What can you do to determine what the kids' interests are to begin with, even before doing this particular unit? On page 223, in the second paragraph, I have the following highlighted. So page 223, second paragraph, third line, it reads, he, Mr. Fazar, bases this decision on the interests of his particular group and his past experience with teaching this theme. Aha! So not only do you have to consider what the kids' interests are, but your own experience in teaching a particular theme or a particular unit. In fact, to add to this, not only do you have to consider your experience, but also your personal desire to use this particular unit or this particular theme. If this isn't something that you necessarily desire to do, you shouldn't do it. If it's a theme or a unit you have no experience in, obviously you shouldn't do it. What you might want to do instead is observe your more experienced co-teachers and find out how they use these particular themes. And that will tell you how to use that particular strategy, art as an integrated part of an extended unit of study. So those are the only four I want to look at. Art as a separate activity, art used to extend or reinforce learning in another curricular area, art as a super activity integrating several curricular areas, and art as an integrated part of an extended unit of study. Okay, so we know what we're doing for Journal 6. We know what we're doing for ICA number 6, and of course we know what we're doing for our observation. Now then, we have to hope that the college will reopen after spring break. So far, that's what we're doing. Hopefully, we're not going to lose the whole rest of the semester. So therefore, we have to pray. So to end this final lecture on a humorous note, I'm going to pretend that you're all Jewish people like me and that you're in my synagogue. And we're going to improvise a Hebrew prayer in hopes that the college will reopen in a timely fashion. Okay? Let's hold hands. Here we go. Baruch atah Hashem Eloheinu melech haolam. Southwestern College must reopen after spring break. Amen. Enjoy your spring break.